I want to force my players to eat 50 pounds of cheese. Now, let me remind you, Dungeons & Dragons is a fantasy role-playing game, so no actual humans are going to consume cheese. But as a dungeon master, I'm so skilled in my art form that most players have a true one-to-one connection with their characters, and they really feel like they're in the world that I build around them. So invested they are that the pure emotional trauma of consuming that much cheese within the game will have real-life ramifications. If I can get my players to eat a buttload of cheese, it should be enough for them to rip their own hearts out. Now you may be asking, Jake, why are you doing this to your players? It's because they're insufferable. What I'm saying is, my talents are being wasted. Just like Miss Sarley's second grade art class, I've not been given the tools to properly express myself. My hand turkey represented the cultural and global impact of the 12 Russo-Turkish Wars. This metaphor was obviously lost on Miss S, as she ignored my request to send it into the Smithsonian. Instead, she hung it in the hallway for November. Fun fact, Mrs. S never married, and I don't think she ever will. So what's better than ruining the emotional psyche of a Dungeons & Dragons group than forcing the players to eat a copious amounts of coagulated dairy? Such an embarrassment would obviously force the group to disband. Some Dungeoneers might even retire from the game. But one cannot simply set up the mousetrap game board and expect the plastic pieces to actually work. No. I needed to be the Chris Hansen of D&D. As a great dungeon master, I hold myself to very high regard. I can't just say that the players are cursed and they have to eat a bunch of cheese. I need to consider every single factor in order to force my players to eat an uncomfortable amount of cheese in a fake world. First step is research. What's an uncomfortable amount of cheese?
I don't mind rolling up my sleeve, so I bought 20 pounds of cheese, locked myself in the bathroom, and started the hot water to get the room real steamy. I then proceeded to eat the cheddar cheese until I cried, threw up, and then both.
9 pounds was my limit. I felt like I was weak from that morning's polo, so I tried again the next day, and I passed out. After consuming 11 pounds. So I took the average of both days and I plugged it into the formula I saw in Good Will Hunting. This got me to 12.5 pounds of cheese per character, meaning in total I would create 50 pounds of cheese for my party of 4 to consume. So that's step 1. I learned what an uncomfortable amount of cheese is. I also learned that my insurance provider dropped me. I didn't even know that was possible. Next I had to figure out how to bring cheese into my world. You see, an amateur dungeon master might just assume that their medieval world would have cheese in it. But I go a little bit deeper. If you're a DM who doesn't have history and lore for every single speck of sand in the universe, then you may as well hire Stanley Steamers, because I can smell the bullshit deeply ingrained in your carpet. The conventional modern perception is that mammals produce milk, and that's what cheese is made from. But I needed real answers. I needed to create a one-to-one perfect simulation of how a fantasy world would adapt over time, over millennia, to create cheese. First step, I needed to buy my fauna, or creatures that were going to evolve and adapt in order to create cheese. Now, funds were still a bit tight, so I was forced to buy knockoff sea monkeys. The reviews were a bit mixed on these triops, but directly from the manufacturer they said, these are cooler than monkeys, way cooler, bigger, and more active. I was also warned to not eat them. We'll see if that happens. I thought these claims were a bit sus, maybe some marketing baloney. But I went to the people, I went down to the customer reviews, and I was astonished to hear from Sandy that, quote, triops are not like everyday fish. They require attention and will remember faces. If you patient, you may be able to teach them a trick or two. That's incredible, but this review from Troy Neal really sold me on the idea. 5 out of 5 stars, amazing display of cannibalism. I wasn't sure how the whole triop project would go, but quickly found out how much triops hate each other. They taught my son that in order to secure a place in the hierarchy of life, you have to eat all of your siblings. These were the competent, competitive, face-recognizing dog-eat-dog creatures I was looking for to hopefully evolve and make cheese. So I ordered them right away and set them into their new world. After researching the molecular structure of milk protein, I concluded that a beef stick should be a pretty good substitute for a dairy source. Now all I had to do was wait, as millions of years were being simulated. I came back from Paris Fashion Week to find something most peculiar. The little guys had created Conway Twitty's 1991 album Even Now, the deluxe edition with 3 unreleased tracks. It was astonishing, but it wasn't cheese, so I had to start again. I realized I had made a mistake. This world had to be different than ours. Fantasy worlds have magic, and I didn't incorporate that. So I went and found the most scientifically proven magic thing in our world: crystal meth.
And the next morning, I awoke to a small village of little shrimps waking up early on the farm to go milk other shrimps that they had enslaved and bred to create cheese. It was beautiful. Life persists. Until the beef stick got moldy and they all died. But I got the data that I needed.
Perfect. So with cheese now within my world, the question became, how am I going to get 50 pounds of it to my players, and how am I going to convince them to eat it? Well, the logistics of acquiring 50 pounds of cheese shouldn't be too difficult, considering my party is already in a hot spot of dairy activity. But luring them to eat the cheese, that's psychological. Like every college student, I was a psych major for 1 semester, and one thing I learned from that time was something called suggestibility, or the use of senses such as repeating words or smells or sights to evoke a certain action out of someone. So you convince the players through repetition that they want the cheese so that they go get the cheese. Leaving the jungle, they see the yellow sun melt over the sky as the cream. A cart carrying copious amounts of cheese passes by us, but this is merely a decoy, and the cart ends up in a volcano. Fondue, cheesecake. After finding the goblin coin, they help the town elderly replace her petunia so she can actually be one of the party members' secret clones with better hair. Assassination awakens the great Begingu, who opens a rift to the 9 hells, releasing 100,000 yen with the help of Tumbo, the Cyclops engineer who needs help learning how to ride his bike so he's not embarrassed in front of his kid. 16 hours later, and they arrive at the Temple of Gornia. They use the coin to open the secret door, and a cool breeze fills their nostrils of pungent smell. They look off into the beacon, and they see a throne made of, I don't know, 50 pounds of cheese? There's always the player that takes the first bite of cheese, and once they take a bite, they have a second bite. And once they take that second bite, another player thinks, well, they're eating all the cheese, I gotta get on this. So they start eating the cheese, and once that happens, groupthink sets in, and the other 2 members come in and join the cheese, and soon, everybody's harfing down the cheese. I've done it, I've finally done it. 8 months of planning, and the bastards are gonna do it. They're gonna eat the 50 pounds of cheese. A fiery blaze was in my eyes as I looked at my players. Their impending doom was unfolding in front of them. I myself saw the shackles begin to release from my hands, and the words just slid out of my mouth as I told them to make a constitution check. And they passed. They all passed. They rolled like an 18 or higher, all of them. I mean, we had been on this journey to obtain the cheese for so long that they leveled up a bunch. So that means, to them, the cheese was tasty. It was good. They wanted more. They hip hip hooray, pat their bellies. One of them made a little toot. It's not fair. I suffered for this. I was the one who ate an uncomfortable amount of cheese in my bathroom. I had to max out my credit card to buy some shrimp brine. I had to take some classes with psych majors. You're supposed to eat the cheese and that's it. You're gone. Kaputs. I don't know what I said, okay? But the eyes, they stopped looking at me. I grabbed my stuff. I headed outside. They waved. They said, see you next week. And I got in my car.
On the drive home, I listened to the droning hum of the car, lights passing as I replayed the past month in my head. I made them eat the cheese. What can I make them do next week?